Committee of the MDC, Monday, June 30th, 2025. Mr. Clerk, do we have a form?
Yep.
Good thing in place. We move to item 2. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Again, any public comments relative to agenda items? There being none, we move to item 3. Are there independent consumer advocate comments or questions relative to agenda items?
Thanks. I have none at this time.
Okay. Moving to item 4, approval of meeting minutes of April 28th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Are there any questions, additions, or deletions? May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to item 5, a report from DeHaven Associates. Mr. Lee, as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Great, thank you. Same here. Pleasure is mine. Good afternoon, everybody. I will try to keep my comments brief. In fact, let's look at the lighter version for the pension fund. And this is just a stapled handout that's separate that I think everybody has. And I'll talk about the economy just briefly because, as you know, this is very backward-looking, and frankly, a lot has changed as we stand here today in June. But this captures January, February, March, and the big number that I think really jumps out at you is if you look at those two columns in the upper left-hand corner of the page, GDP came in at a negative number for the first quarter. And as you probably know, part of the GDP calculation comes up as net exports, and there were a lot of imports that happened compared to exports in the first quarter ahead of all of the tariffs that were expected in April. So this GDP number is a little bit of an anomaly. If you had backed that out, it would have been a very modest positive number. So continuing the trend that we saw, the US economy still growing at a modest pace. Otherwise, all the other numbers are pretty similar. You see that unemployment rate pretty similar, just north of 4%. CPI, which is a reflection of inflation, also was modest, call it right around 2.5%. And of course, the Fed funds did not change that much. In fact, didn't change at all. Upper right-hand corner of the page, just to reflect for us, because really a lot has changed, especially in the equity markets. For the quarter, it was down 4.3% for large cap stocks as represented by the S&P 500. Ironically, stocks outside the US did well because they were less affected by all of the tumult that we had domestically. And outside the US, stocks were up 7% as measured by the MSCI EAFE. And if you go towards the bottom of the page of those columns, NCREIF Odyssey, US Aggregate, and T-bills, they were all positive. So securities that are more sleep home, safe at night type of securities did well for the quarter. Those that took a little bit more risk in stocks didn't do quite as well. If I could ask you to flip a couple of pages to page 9 for me, and this is the page that says Performance Summary. And as you know, this is a snapshot of the performance of the portfolio over different trailing periods. So if you look in the middle of the page, for the most recent quarter, the fund lost 1.6%, which is a poor rank in the 93rd percentile. However, relative to our bogeys, not that bad. What I mean by that is that our shadow index actually was down 1.7%, so it was down a little bit more than us. And remember, the shadow index is if we had put all of our monies in the asset allocation that we have in index funds, that's where we would have gone. So we actually lost a little bit less. For the trailing year, our fund was at 5.3, trailing 3 years, 4.8, over the longer term, more robust performance. 5 years, 11.5, and since March of 2015, 8%. Both of those numbers are top quartile, and in fact, the 10-year number is top decile. What also is heartening is that if you look at those numbers, with the exception of the quarter, the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 years, all of those top line numbers exceed the shadow index and the policy index. So the portfolio is doing what's supposed to be doing. Our rank is just based on whatever the asset allocation is. And in fact, if you look at the asset allocation, that's in the upper right-hand corner of the page. And you see, at least as a snapshot of the portfolio at the end of March, if you add up all of the equity components, large, mid, small, and international, combined, that's about 70%. Real estate, timber, domestic fixed income, and cash came in at about 30%. And with all that happened in the markets, even though we were down 1.6%, if you look at the bottom corner of the page, the portfolio value did not change that much because we had a contribution, we had some income, and even though we had a little bit of a loss, we treaded water and the portfolio value stayed at $268 million. If I could ask you to go to the next slide, page 11. And page 11 shows you that over the long term, the portfolio has been consistently doing well. So you see that this does capture the portfolio since the end of 04, right until where we are, first quarter of 25. So a little over 20 years. And it's appreciated nicely because that dark line, again, is the corpus of the fund. Again, not a smooth ride, but overall goes into the northeast quadrant. And in fact, the gap between the top line and the middle line has increased a little bit. So that's good because that middle line is if we had this hit the assumption rate over that time. And these dollar values are shown in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. The market value at the starting point was at $121 million. And even though we've taken out almost $150 million, we wound up at $268 million at the end of the quarter. And in fact, if you look at the single sheet handout that we have also, because this single sheet handout gives you the market values as of the end of May, and you see that it was a continuation of reasonable performance. In fact, 1 month, and this is dramatic, 1 month the portfolio was up 4.8%, while the shadow index was only up 3.9%, bringing the market value up to $277 million. So roughly $10 million more than what we had at the end of the quarter. And as of last Friday, the portfolio value was at about $284 million. So May and June were very good months. I gave you the abbreviated version of the pension fund. I'm happy to go through each of the components. Right now, what I would say is that we're comfortable with the components. We're not making any recommendations on changing the asset allocation because overall the asset allocation is within guidelines. We are a little bit underallocated to the more secure assets of fixed income and a little bit overallocated to some of the equity allocation, but we are comfortable with that. But happy to address any questions that you all might have on the pension fund or the markets.
Anybody have any questions? I have several, David.
Yes, sir.
What would you recommend, if anything at all, to us in terms of either looking at our current strategy or thinking essentially, let's say 4 or 5 years down the road? I mean, I'm asking you to sort of look at your crystal ball here, but
Sure. My crystal ball is pretty cloudy, but what I can say is that I think there is going to be volatility from here to there because honestly, I would not think that we'd have hit new equity all-time highs so quickly after what we saw happen within the first quarter. The tariff that we have imposed on many goods coming throughout the world into the U.S., that is an implicit tax that we still haven't felt yet. And that's why the Fed hasn't decreased short-term interest rates. And the reason why I say that we haven't felt it yet was that there was a lot of front loading in the months of January, February, March. And we still haven't gone through all of that front loading. And the way you could see that is the amount of trade that happened spiked up before April, went down in April, and after there was some reconciliation, started coming back up. We're not at the rates that we were at the tail end of last year, but still more of an accommodation. Having said that, it looks like earnings are still reasonable, but when you look at how much companies are making relative to where the peak of the market was right around the dot-com, we're not at that level yet, but we're within spitting distance. So we are a little bit expensive as well. One could then try to decipher it by teasing out the pieces that are more expensive than those that are cheaper. So the ones that are more expensive are technology oriented. Still, when you're looking at the Mag 7, if you will, but also companies that are more focused on AI, artificial intelligence, they tend to be quite expensive. And the other sectors tend to be more cheap. So there's a bifurcation. The ones that up here are quite expensive. The ones down here aren't as expensive. On a combined basis, it's taking the market up. So long-winded way of saying, I think that there is volatility. Our asset allocation, though, is a reasonable asset allocation that will withstand some of that volatility and will work for us over the long term. We have a good balance of liquid assets and less liquid assets because we are cash flow negative here. So that's why we try to tap into some cash we have on the sidelines, or if we need to, then we can tap into some of the more liquid equity assets. But most pension funds have migrated to 70 to 75% equity exposure, whether it's direct stocks or some equity-like exposure. So in order for us to maintain a type of return, we do need to consistently do that over the long term.
Any other questions? Do you want to cover OPEB?
Yes, if I may, thank you. So OPEB is a little bit easier story because the components are a little bit less complicated. So the book, actually, now we have to go to the OPEB book. It's the thinner book. It says OPEB. And I'll just hit on a couple of slides real fast. So for the OPEB,
Excuse me, David, does everyone here have a copy of the OPEB book, or do they need one?
yeah, you know what, it may just be easier if I just do the single slide. If you guys want to do that, I'm fine with that because most of this captures all the information we need. So in front of you, you all have a single sheet which gives you the May update for the OPEB plan. It's the backside of the sheet that
Backside.
said pension fund. And in the snapshot here, you'll see that the portfolio also increased nicely, up 3.2% for 1 month. Not quite as much as the pension, but that's because here we're a little bit more conservative relative to the pension, not by much. And you'll see that this brings the market value to about $18.6 million. This is a very easy portfolio to understand because when you look at the first column there, all of this is indexed. We have large cap exposure with Fidelity, S&P 500, mid cap exposure also with Fidelity, small cap exposure and international all with Fidelity. Our bond exposure is with Vanguard, and that's indexed too, which is why when you look at the rows on the right side, all the numbers in black match up with the numbers right underneath, which are the benchmark returns or the shadow returns. So we try not to get too complicated in this portfolio. We want some exposure to the overall markets, but we're not taking a ton of risk by doing that. And overall, at a high level, this one really has more of a target of 65-35, and that's kind of what we are in this portfolio. Pretty straightforward. Again, not making any recommendations or changes to this as well. In this case, just so you know, we do have cash flows that run out. So for instance, relative to where we were at the end of the quarter, we did take out roughly, call it $700,000 to meet obligations. So that's why we do keep a sizable portion actually in liquid assets here. It was intentional because we wanted more of a safety net. But not making any recommendations for changes. Happy to address any questions that you might have on the OPEB plan.
Any questions for David? Once again, any questions for David? There being none, thank you once again.
Great.
Always a
Thank you
pleasure
all.
to see you.
Appreciate it.
We move to item 6, discussion of the management study.
Good afternoon. Kelly Shane, Chief Administrative Officer. I believe that you were sent, John, were they sent the RFP? Yeah. It was this morning, I believe, so you may not have had a chance to review it. So for that, I apologize. But I wanted to offer, Scott, did you want to say anything before I get into the different sections of the RFP?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I gave Kelly direction that by ordinance or by law, the CEO has is the selection authority for this RFP. I have the ability to delegate the authority. I have chosen not to. So I just want to clarify that for the committee. And we have added, Kelly's going to go through this document. You've seen this before in the previous PP9 meetings, but because of the conversations we've had recently with strategic planning, we've added the strategic planning component into the RFP scope of services to make sure that the strategic plan is considered as it's being developed as part of this plan.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So what you have in front of you is a typical RFP put together by our procurement team. And it's an RFQP, which is a request for qualifications and proposals. And it's the evaluation is done on a low price, technically acceptable basis. For a dollar value of this size, that makes the most sense here. And I just wanted to go through the different parts. Do you all have either a hard copy or a copy from OpenText that you can review or walk through with me? The different sections, or just go through the table of contents? How would you like to do this?
Table of contents is all right.
So if you look at the table of contents, does that work?
That's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. If you look at the table of contents, you have the introduction, which gives the intent of the district to provide for what this RFP, the purpose of it is. And the rest of that section is really our boilerplate templated clauses that go through who the district is, about the district, what our proposal, submittal instructions and deadline are. What I've put in there is that we can issue this RFP in July after the board has approved the RFP. We can issue this as early as right after the board approval, which would mean that we could have questions submitted, answered, and we could have proposals due by early August of this year, of next month. And so that goes through the part 1, which is the introduction. If you go to part 2, scope of services, I just wanted to share with you how we put together this scope of services. So I watched and listened to the last meeting we had, and everybody on the committee's comments, the resolution that was created from those comments. I watched the video a couple of times actually and wrote down notes because all of you had comments as to what you would want in the scope of services. And again, this is the development of the scope of services and plan for a management study, which was the resolution. So that's the title of this RFP. So not only did I include comments from everybody as best I could, there were a lot of different comments in there, but also I incorporated information from the market research I had done when you had requested that we develop a scope of work for a management study. And I had met through market research with a couple of firms that had expertise in management plans for utilities. And one of those, and I think I brought it up to you in that first meeting, one of the advice was to do, if you're in the process of your strategic plan, was to first go through getting your strategic plan up and functioning before you go through the study of a management study, to ensure that you've got your strategic plan in place, you've done that self-assessment survey, so you know what you want to focus on in your strategic plan. And then a management study is to review how you're performing against that strategic plan. So in this scope of services, which starts in part 2, part of the scope, as Scott mentioned, was to make sure that we that whoever does the scope of services incorporates the impact of the fact that we're going through the strategic plan and doing the self-assessment survey has on the timing or the plan to do that management study. And then part 3 is the proposal submittal requirements, and this is our normal technical proposal submittal requirements. However, it was created in the idea of exactly what we're asking for. So you'll see the management approach ask specific questions about what we're asking for, a scope of services, and so the management approach is detailed and tailored to the request that we're asking for. The price proposal, asking for a fixed price in this case. I don't see any reason why we should be asking for hours and rates when we're asking for a very specific project with a very, we don't need to lay out a long-term timeline. You're asking for a scope of services and a plan, and companies that do this for a living should be able to provide it on a fixed price basis. If you disagree, I'm just looking for your input. You can review the scope of services, you can review how we're asking for a price proposal, and if you have comments, please feel free to provide them. And we'll certainly, or we can talk about it here, and we can incorporate any changes you'd like to make to those proposal requirements. And the last several, and that evaluation and selection part 4 also includes, as Scott mentioned, the source selection and the selection process, and also that we will enter into an agreement. We have a standard independent consultant agreement terms, which we will enter into with the successful respondent. How we go through the selection process in a low price, technically acceptable RFP is that we rank the proposals as either qualified or not qualified based on the criteria we set out in section 4.1, evaluation and selection. And we rank those as either qualified or not qualified. And of those top qualified folks, so anybody that's qualified, we put them on a list. We have not opened the price proposal yet. Once we have the qualified candidates, the evaluation team identifies the qualified candidates. We then open the price proposal, and that respondent that's qualified with the lowest price would be presented to the selection authority, who would then review the findings and an evaluation report from the evaluation panel, and then either do their own due diligence, interview the consultants, or make the award decision based on the evaluation panel's results. The rest of the part 5 and part 6 are just our normal terms and conditions that we put in our RFPs and the forms that we require all respondents to complete. The one last thing that I wanted to mention is that because this is the development of a scope of services and a plan to conduct an RFP and a plan to conduct a management study, whomever would be, who would be submitting a proposal in response to this would not be allowed to actually submit a proposal for the second phase, which would be the RFP for the management study, as there would be a conflict of interest. You can't create the scope, create the plan, and then bid on the actual work to be done, the actual study to be done. So that is made clear in the intent at the very beginning of the RFP. And that's it.
Actually, that was a question I was gonna ask, if the person who writes this can bid, but is there that many companies around that'd be even interested in doing this if they can't get the big one? Are we gonna be,
We'll see.
we'll see, okay.
That was the direction from the committee, so that's what we did.
Well, can we change that? It just seems to me that if a guy writes this, he knows what he's doing, and you hate to not eliminate him from doing the whole project if he's competitive. I don't know. I just can't believe there's a lot of companies that do this. I know there's people that do it, but if I looked at this, I wanted to do the whole thing, I wouldn't ignore this, obviously. Right?
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
the concern we have right now is we don't have a budget for it.
Okay.
So we don't know what this is gonna cost, and the whole concept of the first step, which is to draft the scope, will help us determine what a realistic budget would be to perform a,
You're right, except if the
Yeah.
guy gives you a budget, he
Yeah.
can't do the second part.
right,
So,
right.
again, if this was my world, I'd say I'm not doing the first part. I'll wait till somebody else does, and I'll do the second part.
Well, there are smaller firms that may be able to help us with the scope but don't have the capacity to do,
The big
the overall study, so,
See what happens.
yeah.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
But is a conflict, as you structured this,
Mhm.
consistent, or is it something in the industry that conflict of, if you said it, you got a conflict of interest and you're out to respond?
So this requirement is to consult with somebody as requested to talk about what does a management study look like for our type of organization?
The first step.
First step, yeah.
Yeah, how do we plan for that? What goes into the scope? So if we worked with one company to put that scope, to work with you, to learn what you wanted in that final scoped project, to then write that scope, to then put that plan together, and then we go out to bid with that plan, that scope, of course we have to exclude that company who put that all together, because they've just had the upper hand in any bid they would provide, because they know exactly what you want, they know exactly how you want it, and they've just guided you in putting it together.
If I may, this is common. Anytime an engineering firm does a master plan for us, they're not allowed to do the design. So this is consistent with what we do. The complicating part was we read the resolution about 5 times to make sure we completely followed the direction of the committee. The committee wanted to do an RFP to hire a firm to actually draft an RFP for the master plan. So that's what we did. And we're hopeful that we will get some firms to apply for that, and we'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm struggling with this as well. Company A submits a master plan. MDC reviews it, tweaks it, but it becomes their plan by acceptance, without maybe not doing anything. Is that not correct? To go out to the RFP.
For this, this project, this is for them to propose to work with the district to put a scope of services together for the RFP,
They're gonna-
for the
They're
management.
gonna present that scope to you, to us. We're going to review it, change it, revise it, amend it, or not. But whatever happens, it then becomes our plan, MDC's proposed scope.
But they're not going to submit a scope in this RFP.
Well, not the scope, I'm using the
Yeah.
wrong terminology.
Well, yeah.
So my point is, if in fact, after this is presented to us and we accept it, it becomes ours at this point, why would we not allow, I just don't grasp why with so few vendors out there, that if we accept what we would want to go out with an RFP, that the person or company that presented that proposal, if we find it acceptable, why would not others find it acceptable in addition to the company that proposed it? I'm just struggling with the same issue that Commissioner had, that I'm not sure why they should be excluded from being part of the putting in for the RFP.
Well, the way we're writing this, and
Well, I understand that part. I'm just saying
Request.
why we're writing it that way.
because that was the correct request of the committee. That was in the resolution.
But did they give us, did they give explanation as to why?
And we could,
If
The
I may,
request-
if I may,
Thank you.
through the chair, we followed, we had a lot of debate on this topic, right? We had lots of debate by different commissioners with different concepts. And we must have modified the resolutions a couple of times during the meeting. And so we went by exactly what the committee passed. I would suggest that in reviewing and sitting down to develop a scope by any consultant, they are going to learn aspects of what we want and what we need that may not be in writing as part of this is the scope, but they will have inside knowledge that others don't. And so the first rule of procurement is everybody's supposed to know the same thing when it's time to bid, right? So if the consultant is meeting with staff to talk about the scope and understand the dynamics of what the board's looking for, what staff is looking for, it's going to give someone an upside to the process. I mean, just understanding what the challenges are for the MDC, you can only put so much in writing. You can put a scope together like what Kelly has, but there'll be a lot more information. Remember this, we have budgeted $60,000 for this. So this task alone is 60,000 or 50,000. 50, sorry, 50. So we're going to spend X number of hours, pick a number, 300 divided by 50,000 is a number of hours that this consultant will work with MDC staff and PPI to understand what we're looking for and to incorporate that 50 hours worth of manpower, womanpower into an RFP. There will be things that aren't here, but they know. And it's going to help them. And that's why, as part of all of our procurement processes, we never allow the firm that does the master plan to actually bid on the design of the work. So we only followed what the recommendation was from the resolution. I guess if you wanted to provide a modification to the resolution.
I'm not suggesting
Okay.
that, I just want a better understanding. And if I understand correctly, those that are going to consider submitting, this language will not be foreign to them.
I don't think so.
This is standard language for this type of request.
We don't put out to bid this type of request very often. We have engineering design firms that design through a task order, design plans and RFP packages for construction work. But they're not going to be doing the construction work. They design the plans and put those plans together for a as a designer, an engineering firm to help us put our packages together to go out to bid. I've never put an RFP out for somebody to design a scope for an RFP to go out for services. I just haven't done this before. So,
That's a design and build. They
But
couldn't do that.
if nobody responds, then you know what you have to change.
Right.
So you can know
Correct.
quickly. Nobody responds, you take it off.
Might have your answer.
Yeah, there you go.
Go through a lot of expense in
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, yes, you might get your answer as part of this submission process. But that like I said, to be respectful to the committee, there was lots of conversations about what was the resolution. And we read it, all of us read it multiple times to make sure we were completely compliant with the resolution.
Anyone else? What's the deadline date for people getting back to you for comments? People haven't had a chance to read this, so I think we need to give people a
Correct.
chance to digest this.
of course.
But I think also we need to have a fuse on this so that we can have this process move along and not be sort of stalled.
Well, I believe that the committee would have to forward this to the board, who would have to approve the issuance. Is that how that would work? If that is the case,
Yes.
then the board meeting's on Monday. And this committee,
Well, I don't,
well, then, so
you got
the
4th
next
of
board
July.
meeting would be the next time you'd have the opportunity.
I mean,
I think.
not everyone is here, and I think people need a chance to.
Okay, I was just telling you the soonest. I had it ready to go.
Have no schedule. The schedule is
Yes.
the PPI committee.
Yep.
So whatever you choose to do, we'll be happy to, follow through with that. So it sounds like the next PPI meeting, which is 2 months from today, would be the next opportunity.
Or whenever
Or whenever
the committee.
Yeah, whenever the
Committee
committee
wants to make a
chooses
decision.
to
Makes a
review
decision,
and,
yeah.
yep.
Are we not doing it tonight?
Okay,
If you would like to set a deadline for comments, that would be appreciated.
well, I think that people should be able to have their comments, if any, in 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks at the most.
Yeah, I just took a quick look at it. To be honest with you, most of it's just boilerplate. There's only a couple little paragraphs that really mean anything.
Correct.
So,
I would concentrate on section 2, the scope.
that's it, 2.1, that's it.
All right, then we will, for the sake of our discussion here, we should have everything in and back to you in the month.
Okay. And I can send out a revision for your review on that
And I would,
before the next meeting.
I would think that we would ask members of the committee, basically, to take a look at this and to review it and to get back with their comments, if any. And if they don't, then essentially they've missed the bus.
Okay.
John, could I ask you to send a notice out to the committee in that regard, please?
Reminding them, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any more concerns or comments? Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Item 7.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jamie Harlow, HR. So I will do my PP&I report, monthly report. What you have in front of you is reports for the month of June and July, or I'm sorry, May and June. Sorry about that. So from a staffing position, we're fairly similar to where we were when I last reported at 471 is the funded positions currently at 440. We talked last meeting about why we're not at the 470. And then active recruitments, again, is a moving target, but about 18 right now. In terms of employment activities over the months of May and June, we had 4 new hires in May, 2 in June. Promotions, generally we're posting internal and external. In the month of May, we had 3. We had 1 in the month of June. Retirements, we had 3 in the month of May, none in June. Resignations, none in May, 2 in June. And then no terminations. Any questions on that information?
Anyone have any questions?
Okay. I know what I've been asked to report. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
You had 2 in May and 1 in June?
2 what?
Resignation.
We had no resignations in the month of May and 2 in June.
We had none.
Just 2. Yep.
Do we have any retirements? I'm sorry.
None right now until we do have some slotted right now for July. I'm sorry. Yes, for July. So tomorrow we're supposed to have a couple people retiring, but that's it. We don't have actually anything else slotted for the majority of the year, but that again changes too based on individual circumstances. So I think so far for the year we've had about 15 retirements. Any other questions?
No, not at this point.
Okay. I know I've reported previously on which vacancies we have. So again, we have approximately 18 vacancies at various stages of the recruitment process. We have about 5 positions within Local 184. Most of those are posted to the union first, and then if we don't get union employees, then those go external. 3713, we post simultaneously to the union employees or internal to the district, and also external, and we have 3 of those positions at various phases in the process. We don't currently have any with 1026, and then we do have a number of exempt and excluded jobs. I think we have 8 of those. So that's where we are currently. If you have any specifics or want me to go into more detail, just let me know.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Item 8, opportunity for general public comments. Once again, opportunity for general public comments. Item 9, Commissioner request for consideration of future agenda items. I have one. That is the acquisition of CDLs and the process. I'd like that to be an agenda item. Once again, Commissioner requests for consideration of future agenda items.
Chair,
Yes.
possible consideration. Is there an opportunity for you to call a special meeting to deal with the management studies, so we don't have to wait an entire month
Sure.
2 months, isn't it?
or 2 months, whatever the time frame is?
I agree.
Get it before the meeting, the board meeting would that be August?
Sure, I don't see that as being a problem. I think we need to move this along as quickly as we can.
All right, thank you.
John, can you schedule that, please? Any other items for item 9? Not item 10, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.